calling all hardware startup founders and innovators. Welcome to Creations Engineered with Srishti, your go-to podcast where we share valuable insights into building IoT hardware products from successful innovators and founders. Whether you're a hardware enthusiast or a startup founder, we've got something for you. So grab your headphones and let's engineer the future together.
Welcome to the third episode of Creations Engineered. All the viewers out there, I know just time flies by. I think it's already third episode. I myself am looking at the screen like very happy and cherishing myself. And today, what more can I be cherished about? I have a very special guest joining us, Mr. Vinay Solanki, the business head of Nash Industries. He's been globally recognized as the IoT thought leader recently, and I've been seeing him and following him for a very long time. We've been meeting for almost last 3 years in various events. Great to have you here, Vinay. How are things out there?
Things are good, great. Nice to be here on your show. As I said, Teja, I always live, breathe, and smoke IoT, so I'm always happy to share whatever limited I know about it.
Great. I understand that breathe and breathe. That's where you're the thought leader out there, Vinay. So coming here, let me give a quick intro about our guest here. So Vinay is a TEDx speaker and one of the top 20 global thought leaders in IoT and IIoT. Vinay holds approximately 20 years of experience across AI, IoT, FinTech, and digital transformation. So he's going to bring us deep insights through his journey and through his various associations with different firms across global levels like Lenovo, Airtel, Goldman Sachs, and Napino in the past. So what is this agenda all here today, viewers, is it's going to be about what's driving the IoT and AI. That's going to be the topic today. And what I would recommend all the startup founders who are viewing this webinar right now is they should keep in mind what to build in a scalable engineering solution. And with a thought leader like Vinay, he's going to share his immense experience on guiding you guys into various steps and see how, as a startup founder, you never fail. So that's going to be the agenda for the next 30 minutes. So without wasting any time, viewers, let's get in and jump in to ask Vinay some interesting questions. So first, Vinay, is how is your journey connecting various challenges in the startup founders today? They have a lot of questions, a lot of challenges in the past, but what does that journey look like when you connect with such startup founders out there?
Sure. So basically, let me break this down into two parts. One is what is the startup trying to do? And second is, and of course, what's the journey going to pan out like in the whole 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10 and the 10 to 100 growth journey of startups, right? So personally, of course, other than doing what I do, I also invest in startups and I mentor a few startups across the globe, particularly in IoT and AI and that domain. One, I think, perspective and learning that I've derived while working with many startup founders is when you choose to start something new, right? You look at two things. One is how big is that market that you're going after? Second is what problem you're trying to solve. And are you trying to solve it very uniquely? Are you a unique player in that solution or are you one of the many that are doing the same thing over and over again? I think what I've seen that if people are starting from the ground up, any product company, particularly which is focused on AI and IoT kind of solution, they technically tend to decide their market by the use case, right? So one type of area which I've seen people do is build a solution for a particular industry or a particular use case in that industry. Now, the challenge that they might face is if they have not understood the customer requirement and what the end user or the customer want when they're trying to solve that problem. Let's take a simple example of an asset tracking solution, right? It's a very, very common solution nowadays across the world. Everybody is able to give you a small device with a GPS and a location and maybe some other parameters, maybe the health of the vehicle or maybe the health of the driver to add onto that, right? So now if somebody is starting there, they might say, okay, the market is already growing. It is quite big. Still, it is growing. Everybody wants to track their asset in real time and the location of their asset, whether it is a truck or a product. But if you are somebody starting in this domain, one thing is you can just provide something similar to everyone else and compete on price. So how long can you keep competing on price is where the challenge will come to you as a founder. But let's take another example. If somebody is starting a horizontal play, like building a platform in IoT and saying that and you offer your platform on which you can build your end application. Now, again, when they will look at the market will look substantially big, right? There are already so many platform companies, but still there is a need for more. But the challenge they might quickly face is, what I will try to do is this going to be a standard platform that will be interoperable to work with multiple applications, or is this going to just suffice for the need of one or two industry or one or two use cases? So I've seen people making mistake jumping into building a platform from day one without realizing that how to make it really generate enough. And you must have heard, right, that some of the big players have stopped their IoT platform actually, or either they have handed over to someone else to run. This is a problem statement which is very difficult to understand. Again, your question is very wide, but I think I've just tried to explain one or two use cases in that.
Absolutely. And I mean, this gives a great credentials to a startup founder, like, classify yourself horizontally and vertically, and do what you're trying to solve. And whatever you're trying to do, be niche in it. That's the entire essence of it. How big the market is doesn't matter, but have a clear understanding of your horizontal and the vertical thing, so you know where you're tapping the market in. I think that's a good one for all the founders out there. Add on this, whenever I talk to these startup founders, this being one of the product ideas that whatever they're trying to solve in the market, they also are unclear on a lot of technical challenges they see, right? Not just the where to tap the market, where exactly the TAM of the market is looking like, but they also face a lot of technical challenges. So this is especially when you try to scale the IoT and AI solutions. Right? When in general they will have a lot of solutions in their hand, but once they get the market, when they want to scale it, they fall into a lot of technical challenges. So what should be the roadmap for a founder-led sales team or a typical 20-member sales team where they're driving from 1 million to 10 million kind of a criteria when they're scaling? What should be the technical challenges they should address, and how should their roadmap look like?
Yeah, so if you compare IoT with other technology, right, which are purely software driven, like SaaS platforms, right, or e-commerce or cloud, or a simple mobile application based products, right, in the market. So I know that there are technical challenges when you build a software as a product, right? And you basically try to overcome that by finding the solution which is readily available in the market, because that stack has matured over the last many years, in fact 2 decades. But when you try to build something in IoT and AI plus IoT, the challenge is that there are 3 moving parts to it, right? You have to solve for the hardware, you have to solve for the connectivity, and then you have to, of course, solve for creating the right stack on top of it that is used by your end user in the software world, right? For anyone who is building a product in the domain of AIoT, where I feel and where I see that people get stuck is how to make that hardware really work in the real-time environment. Proto works very beautifully well. When you go from proto to sample stage of hundreds of 500 unit, it also works almost well. But the moment you start scaling that from 500 to 500,000, let's say, you start facing some of the conditions which you have not envisaged while bringing and building it in the lab, right? Or even at the sample stage. So what happens is the product market fit happens very quickly for an IoT solution which is driven by hardware, but scalability gets stuck. Particularly in India, it is hard to find very, very good embedded engineers or very, very good hardware designers. Right, you need a lot of different skill set when you build IoT, which of course I think China has a lot of it to a larger extent, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, but not so much in India as of now. I think I've also seen companies in US finding it they struggle when they have to build a hardware-driven solution stack. Okay. So my suggestion would be that maybe there are 2 ways to address the problem. If you think somebody else has built a good hardware, okay, then don't spend time in reinventing the wheel. Maybe take that, customize it, build on top of that the full stack and sell it to your customer or offer it to your market. If you think that nobody has done what you're trying to do, then be very thoughtful about the timeline of go to market, especially from the scale perspective. Simple example, Teja, is that I've seen a lot of smart agriculture solutions. They work beautifully well in certain number of farms, but when they scale up, they realize environmental conditions, weather conditions, usage conditions, ground field conditions, they all impact your sensor or your technology, and then it stops working after a certain time. That's why I say hardware is always hard, and be very thoughtful of what you're trying to do in this stack. And of course, last point is, if you have really achieved the scale to a certain stage and you're struggling to go from 10 to 100, my suggestion is go and find the best engineers out there outside your country. If you're building in India, go outside India, find the best, pay them well, get the work done early stage. Don't shy away from investing if you can invest.
What kind of talents mix should the startups aim at the early stages, and what kind of SME should they bring on board? That mix is where the building of the team scales, right? So I'm curious to understand, keeping the global decision in mind, the talent in the available out in Asia, India, or US, different markets. What kind of mix should they have, as we say in the startup zone, and they grow to let's say, and each part till they scale up? What would be your suggestions to them that will help them go across?
Yeah, this is a great question. So see, actually, I came across one team in a box, which are used by these large MNCs or the big fours when they outsource their project to someone. They say that if I outsource you a project, you should have all the skill set in that team in a box model, so that my project does not fail because of limited resource availability or the right skill set availability. If I map that to a IoT solution stack, right, I feel let us look at three skills which are mandatory. One is the skill for somebody who can build the right AI model. Of course, if it is truly an AI-driven requirement, don't fit AI everywhere. Maybe AI is not needed everywhere, but you need to have somebody who can write the AI model, but with the domain knowledge. And if you don't have the domain knowledge, then bring the SME or the subject matter expert of the domain. Let's say if I'm building a solution stack for smart cities, and if I go after infrastructure management solution stack, I really need to bring an SME who understand that domain particularly well to give you all the right variables and parameters that you need to build on top of your data model or your data points, correct? If that expertise is there, then at least you know what kind of data you need to input to get what kind of output, right? The second expertise should be in the domain of the hardware. I think there are three players which are required, right? The right ID designer. So a mechatronics engineer is very important today, because everything is a combination of electronics and mechanical working together, right? If you look at today's car, they are 80% electronics, right?
Correct.
So you need to find a good expertise in the mechatronics side. Second is a very good embedded programmer who can be a firmware developer, who understand how to build the right firmware, typically C, C++, or of course people are using other languages now as well. And third, of course, is a solution player, an architect kind of person, right? Who can build the complete architecture in required for your particular use case or application. So if you find the best embedded, the best mechatronics, an AI, a model creator, and an architect, I think between these three or four people, along with some other people required to build the mobile app, the cloud stack, and of course the connectivity part of it, you should have a very good team in a box required to build expertise. And when I see India, I think India is doing well in software stack, so you can find good engineer from a telecom connectivity understanding how to build a Wi-Fi scalable solution or a Bluetooth scalable solution, or let's say working on a cellular network. You still be able to find that. I think the hardware stack is where we struggle. That is where you need to be thoughtful enough. But go with the mindset of bringing that right team in a box area. I think should be good. Pick the subject matter expert early on, not in the later stages, but in the day zero of your solution designing step. Have that SME as part of your solution designing, because that's where you will take care of all the variables that will impact your hardware or your solution. And take care of those border conditions, edge conditions, which will arrive when you go to scale from 10 to 100.
And this is goldmine, I would say, exactly, because I've been in this industry for the last 10 years. When this is exactly how the phases of the project should be aligned in a team in a box. Bring the right subject matter expertise, so he'll be the brain of the entire project, and surrounding them in the engineers' work, so they know what they're achieving and where they want to go. And especially when you said, mechatronics kind of a role, understanding mechanical and electrical electronics, when you're building electromechanical systems like this. Myself being a mechanical engineer, recently I felt this. My car had a trouble down recently in a highway to Bangalore. What I was using once upon a time was a Maruti Omni. I'm using an electric car. and I don't understand why the engine doesn't start and it doesn't get pushed, right? You can't push a car in an electronics engine and make it on. I mean, I should have been a mechatronics engineer to really understand this more than just a mechanical where you just push the car and get it on. So that real instance itself shows how the world has just moved about from just about mechanical parts to more about electronics domain ruling the market today. There's always a dilemma, right? Build or a buy dilemma. Okay, so especially in the IoT, I see this a lot. When should these kinds of IoT startups or a growing SMB market consider building tech in-house versus leveraging existing platform or partnerships with consultants? What should be the ratio, or when and what should happen? Build in-house from day one, or leverage the platforms or partnership kind of extended engineering teams. What do you think the play should be for an early stage startup and a perennial startup?
So I kind of touched on it earlier also that don't reinvent the wheel where it is not needed. And I think this build versus buy is an important dilemma. There are two angles you have to look at it. In fact, in my book, Confluence of AI and IoT, I've covered a chapter which is called digital ecosystem. So first you have to decide where you want to play in that ecosystem stack and where is your strength, right? Let's say if your strength is more to go to market, if you're better sales, who can sell any technology solution and understand the domain well, then maybe you will choose to play higher in the stack towards the application layer or the software layer and avoid creating the bottom of the stack, which is hardware and the connectivity, and maybe find a technology that you can buy, something that is ready for your stack to work, right? Or if you're very good in a hardware stack, you probably will find a platform that can just take the data from your hardware and build your final application on top of that, and give you all the right working models and the right APIs ready-made. But I think build versus buy depends on one more factor. It's what IP you want to protect, right? Typically what people say that if my core IP is in one part of the stack, whether it is hardware, whether it is in the communication layer or in the software, you will prefer to build that in-house and keep that IP with you, because if it is something unique you're doing, and you will try to bring the other components of the stack from the market readily available. I will give you two examples. I have seen one IoT startup which has done an automation in the retail industry. So you go to any store and there is a robot that starts talking to you about a product kept on the shelf. Okay, it is a startup in Kerala. I met them during the Kerala Startup Mission, and I understand that they knew what the retail customer wants very well. So what they did is they did a quick prototype of a small robot that can actually use a motion sensor, and when somebody passes through that aisle, it will just come out with that biscuit packet and start talking about that new biscuit, which is sitting among the many other biscuit brands which are well known to you. They did not spend too much time on the hardware. They first started testing what the customer wants and how it is reacting to the market behavior, and then they started innovating. They were more agile in their nature. Right. So when they realize that maybe you can just buy some part of the robot easily available in the market, right? Rather than creating it ground up by yourself. Except the basic software and the voiceover, they thought that the motor is available, the camera is available, the mechanical includer standard is available somewhere. Maybe I don't have to spend too much time. So that third part of build versus buy is your time to market. If you think you want to quickly go to the market is ready, demanding it, maybe don't spend too much time and do it later when the time comes.
I mean, this is good. Especially when you say that, I call that as a proof of concept, right? It's more like a dummy proof of concept, which makes you validate your product fit first on what is a USP, and then think about building the other surroundings around it. I mean, real nice. I think we have a couple of questions from people. Let's try to answer them and then get back to the thing. So, how does NB IoT looks to simplify the communication infrastructure and having good connectivity throughout remote India, given the recent deals of SpaceX with Airtel and Jio?
Yeah, so see, basically in connectivity formats, both long range connectivity and short range, NB IoT, which is narrowband IoT, is actually one of the short range last mile connectivity solution. So I think if you must have heard of LoRa, you must have heard of Sigfox, you must have heard of multiple other protocols like that can be used for communication between two devices or devices to the other application. So narrowband IoT is one of the technology that came out of GSMA to say that we can use the spectrum, the narrowband part of the spectrum that is currently used for data and voice communication for M2M communication. machine-to-machine data communication. And I think the viability of that is growing across the world, including India, because it is supported and backed by telcos. Now, you must have also seen 5G, and adoption of 5G in IoT is also growing because specifically in bandwidth constraint or bandwidth hungry solutions like camera vision, computer vision, right? Where you need to transport high data on a faster bandwidth. So what I'm seeing when you look at 5G, which is both public 5G and private 5G, which people are deploying, suited for a particular application, versus NB-IoT suited for a very thin data packet size, which need to move between point A to point B, right? Let's say I'm just transporting the location lat and long of a particular asset inside a environment. I can go for NB-IoT and it works beautifully well. It doesn't mean that other technology will not work in that case. You have to look at two things. One is the cost of the application, the total cost of ownership, TCO, right? A lot of people prefer LoRa because it is unlicensed band. You don't have to pay the license fee, but of course it has other areas of concern. For example, Sigfox is dead, right? They sold themselves for various reasons. It did not work. There are many other technology like RPMA is there, random phase multiple access. Then there is, of course, Thread is there, which is a protocol for communication. So you have to pick and choose. Now, to answer your question, whether NB-IoT will scale very fast, I don't have an answer. What will scale fast? But I know there is a lot of support to it because of the telco backing to it.
And adding to that, Vinay, when you spoke about LoRaWAN, Thread, and many other things, I think people are more inclined towards LoRaWAN more than any other things. Is it because of the open channel out there, which will works between open wide network and multiple nodes? Any reasons why a lot of developers try to pick LoRaWAN as a communication?
See, I'm not very deep into LoRa as a technology, but what I understood is that LoRaWAN was one of the substitutes required to do the last mile communication, and it picked up because of simplicity of the solution. Of course, there is an infrastructure required in terms of the LoRa gateway and the LoRa receiver transmitter that is typically deployed by the big telcos. Like in India, Tata Communication has done it, and in other markets, other companies have done it. I was in fact one day studying that Sigfox, which was more of a European push initiative. LoRaWAN is more of a global, supported by both US and other markets. What I have seen, at least, there are not major technical challenges while using LoRa as a communication. Okay. So it has not failed in major use cases, maybe that. But technically, is it preferred over other technology? I don't have the right answer for it.
Fine, it was just an on-the-go answer because I've been hearing. I thought people really want to understand that. So there's one more beautiful question from the audience out there, Vinay. So even I have this question to you. So we're talking about startups, things like that. So when you say an SMB market or a mid-market client firm, why do you think often they have a very good in-house team, okay? But still, at what stages do you think they really need a partner, an external IoT expertise come on board and help? Any limelight on that? Can you just, out of your experience, have you ever seen that?
Your question is about startups, or your question is about enterprises which are SMEs or MSMEs which look to?
So I would like to understand, like, let's take mid-market. So mid-market have a very good in-house team, right? Mid-market firms. But still I see they also outsource a chunk of or a lot of work outside to consultants or engineering design houses. What would be the prime reason they do that? I just want to get the answer of that. Yeah.
See, of course, can be various reasons. Some companies say that if I do it in-house, it will be slow. I rather outsource to someone who's more agile, more focused on that area. I get my product developed faster, right, from the time to market perspective. Of course, second biggest driver could be cost. What is the cost for a mid-market company to develop in-house versus outside? The third could be the skill set. Do I have the skill set available within my company, or I need to build that skill set first and then build the product? Or it's better to go up to a company and say, hey, Srushti, please do this project for me and develop and design, because you have already done it in the past. I think if I want to outsource something like this as Vinay, right, from my company, I would rather go for somebody who has done that kind of product for someone else. So that means I know that he or she would have already gone through all the ups and downs, the failures and the boundary conditions of that particular product, and then I will outsource. Okay. So that way, I will not spend time on stabilizing the product, the journey from the proto stage to the product market steady stage. I will reduce that time considerably, hopefully, and maybe work more on the end user application and the end user adoption of that technology, right? But if I go 10 years back when I was new to IoT, 2012 timeframe, I realized that a lot of companies did not even knew what is IoT or understood what IoT can do for me. So they did not invest too much of talent building in that stack. When it started picking up, especially after COVID, people realize, okay, I need IoT, especially mid-market, to say, I want to run my warehouse remotely, I want to run my operations remotely. I don't know how to build it. Let's go and outsource to someone who knows and build it faster.
A very, very good piece of interesting information to me as well. Meanwhile, have last couple of important questions or information which I would like to seek from you, Vinay. One is, there are different industries across using IoT, right? It could be manufacturing, telecom, IT industry, FinTech, and many other things, How does the domain influence, this particular domains at each of this industry, influence the way IoT and AI solutions to be engineered or scaled? I think you've touched a bit about this in the conversation, but to be more clear, let's take an industry which are more comfortable, whatever you feel like good. How do you think the domain influence will be there on IoT and AI? Do you think there's a lot of influence in the domain also?
Yes and no. See, let's take example of manufacturing as an industry. Okay. Now, manufacturing as an umbrella is a very wide, right? It ranges from textile manufacturing to apparel to electronics manufacturing to other. Now, if I look at manufacturing as an industry, and let's say we focus on electronic manufacturing as an industry, where people are building end products, electronic products, right? There are multiple areas of challenges, starting from supply chain to inventory management to quality assurance and other things, productivity, OEE, etc. Each of these challenges needs a solution. Now, there are two things. What are my topmost challenge? And I will go to the market and say all the electronic manufacturing industry in India, their top two challenges: inventory turnover ratio and operating efficiency of their line. Now, based on that is where the market will say, most of the service providers, solution provider, right, will say, I will build my solution to solve that particular problem statement. So that we can say, okay, the industry is driving what the stack will look like or what the application will look like, right? Because where the most need, you will build for that first.
Absolutely.
But the moment you build for, let's say, inventory tracking or quality assurance, and you build a solution for electronic manufacturing customer, do you know that are you building it as a generic solution that will scale across 10 electronic manufacturing setup, or you have to start doing a lot of time on customization because they are not same? And I've seen, particularly Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific market, that the type of setup differ from one client to another client, and within the one client itself, the machinery is different. So if I have to do, let's say, OEE as a solution, some machine is PLC enabled, some is not. Some is old, some is new. Some uses ladder-based programming, some uses something else, right? So, and environmental conditions also differ from one plant to another. What industry is saying, I want a solution that works like a cookie cutter approach. I take a solution, it should just scale and deploy across all my plant. What the solution provider is saying, you have too much variability in your house. I cannot build one solution. I have to either build multiple, or I have to spend time in customizing the deployment of every solution. And I think my answer to your question, Teja, is that while the industry is driving the need, industry is not actually working like a partner with the solution provider. They have to work very closely with each other to actually build something that can scale faster. All right. And hardware, again, it takes time to make hardware.
Absolutely.
Right. But you take a beautiful example of software industry, right? When the industry wants BPOs, right, or call centers, it is not just that a solution company came and say, yeah, I built a nice software, there are calling lines, I can service your need by just making this work overnight. Actually, the customer, which are mostly the West, they work with the East or India or other market to say, this is my problem statement, this is what I want, now you do my job, right? And I will keep giving you the right input to do my call center setup, right? And in order to service my customer requirement, starting from teaching them how to speak American English, to training them how to sell an insurance product, was a collaborative approach. It was not a standalone.
Got it. I mean, this is wonderfully laid out actually. I think in this domain influence sector, as you said, the versatility involved in such kind of development needs a lot of collaborative approach as well. You just can't say that this is my solution for this domain and everything goes by. As you said, machines are different, environments are different, and especially east to west, everything changes from the way operations happen. I think this is well said. What is the one piece of advice you say while building sustainable and future-ready IoT IA products that has to scale? What is that one piece of advice you want to say before you sign off?
Very tough question, Teja. I don't know.
I do understand. But yeah, at least on an experience note, if you can throw some limelight to them, because I'm especially targeting the big dreamers. There are always founders who want to solve things in a very methodological, very tedious method or very method. But there are dreamers who are big. That's where I wanted to say one final question.
I think my one piece of advice is use this rapid prototyping and agile approach in what you're doing, right? Don't try to build everything first and then go and test the market. Involve your customer very early on in your solution development life cycle as much as possible, because the VOC, voice of customer, is the most important for any founder, right? If you are building a hardware that is going to solve a particular pain point, involve them in the first 3 to 6 months if possible, to take their feedback, build what they want, and be agile to rapidly evolve your solution. And if that does not work, be ready to pivot. Okay, don't be stuck to a particular stack or a use case or a solution because you love it. Be ready to and open to pivot from one to another if the market doesn't want what you're building and want something else. So don't be too emotionally attached early on.
I think this is wonderful, because in a day-to-day life of what I try to build products and everything, when we start creating that this is the architecture and this is what I'm trying to do, let's say a BLE or a BLE mesh or something like that. But we know there are so many constraints once we do a initial study and we come and address it to the client. There's this much of risk and mitigation actions are there, and you need to pivot at this particular junction, and the other options are this, and most of them are emotionally attached to that particular thing. It's very difficult for them to detach out there, and we as experts should try to help them out. And it just goes into a loop of cycles and again and again and again. So I think you really rightly said that, get emotionally detached when things don't work. Try to pivot out into see what works into the market. Set your date to reach the market faster and see how you can use your mix of talent and reach market. I mean, this is a wonderful piece of advice, Vinay, out there. Else, I'm really happy that I had a good conversation on a lot of questions to help the founders out there. Anything you would like to share your piece of advice before you sign off, Vinay?
No, first of all, thank you. I think the only thing that I would say is that if you're really interested in IoT and AI in the stack, then read my book, Confluence of AI and IoT, and throw questions at me anytime you want. Okay, thanks so much.
Sure, and I mean, there's always people out there reaching out to you. We are also always there to reach out for many other things. So before we sign off, thanks a lot to everybody, all viewers, and Vinay especially. Keep your views on Creations Engineered, where we come up with many more interesting guests to talk about various topics in product development, especially concentrating in product developments related to startup founders, the SMB market, and a lot of tons of IoT related aspects. So once again, Teja here signing off. Have a great week. Looking forward.